Hi, people, welcome to the Town Libraries The Story Shelf, Day 3, Story 3, Part 1. The series I have picked the story from today is Terrifying Ghosts Short Stories. And inside that, the story I have picked is My True Love Gave to Me by Sean Hogan. What begins as just an affection slowly unravels into something strange, unbelievable, and impossible to forget. Some stories don't scream fear, but they whisper it. Let's get into the story. Each Christmas Eve, Dr. Henry Gibbons and his oldest friend, Anthony St. Clair, would faithfully meet to exchange seasonal gifts. The ritual for their arrangement had continued for so long that it was by now almost a sacred rubric, forever solemn and unchanging. Would be conducted in the same fashion every year, save for the fact that, in the interest of fairness, each man took it in turns to host the other. After all, neither of them was getting any younger, and while the journey between their respective homes was not by any means long or onerous, the sapping bite of the December cold often had the unwelcome effect of making 1 mile feel like several, to their aging and increasingly brittle bones at least. Henry had welcomed Anthony into his own modest but comfortable bachelor's apartment the previous Christmas Eve, and so it was that he now found himself sequestered in his friend's book-lined study, bending swiftly down in front of the blazing fireplace to warm his numbed thighs and backside. Henry found himself quietly grateful that the room's hearth was a reasonably large one, expansive enough to warm the full span of his not inconsiderable posterior anyway. Anthony St. Clair himself sat in a leather armchair positioned to one side of the fire, a thick tartan blanket draped over the diminished sticks of his legs. To its left, another identical armchair awaited Henry's occupancy, and between the two chairs, a decanter of fine sherry and two crystal glasses had been placed upon a small table. Everything was precisely as it should be, indeed, as it had always been for year after year, ever since the two men could remember. While one friend had physically waxed with passage of time, just as the other had undeniably waned, their increasing age and any attendant infirmities would never be permitted to interfere with the arrangement. The unchanging nature of the exchange was the very essence of it. To alter or deviate from it in any way would suggest that their feelings about what the ritual symbolized had somehow shifted, and that could never be. The event was not simply a display of seasonal goodwill and friendship, it was an act of the utmost devotion. Accordingly, the gifts they exchanged were no mere trinkets, inevitably to be discarded and forgotten with the coming of the new year, but sacraments representative of something ineffably divine. The gifts in question lay wrapped at the foot of each of their armchairs. Neither man had learnt how to properly wrap presents over the years, and so the handiwork on each was impatiently cursory at best. Normally, such undoubtedly feminine chores would strictly be the province of each man's housekeeper, but as we shall soon see, the inexpressibly precious nature of the two gifts precluded any outside involvement in the affair. Anthony's offering to Henry was a small box-shaped item, perhaps large enough to hold a china teacup. In contrast, Henry's own present was larger, with dome-shaped top. To look at it, one might have surmised it was a small bird cage. Still, there could be no suggestion of disparity between the two gifts, simply for the plain fact that the pair of items concealed inside their respective wrappings never changed. Instead, much like the designated venue for the annual exchange, the two simply alternated year on year, endlessly passing the same two presents back and forth. Rubbing vigorously at his temple buttocks, Henry removed himself from the fireplace and settled into the seat with a relieved sigh, which Anthony took as his cue to lean over and carefully pour them both a small glass of sherry. As the two friends then held their glasses aloft in a silent toast, the reflected flames from the fireplace seemed almost to ignite the amber liquid within. And when Henry brought the glass to his mouth, he sipped at it like a wary chaffinch, as though fearing that the fiery alcohol might sear his fleshy lips. Glancing over at his companion, he noticed that Anthony had now settled back in his chair and closed his eyes. And Henry thought for an instant that he might have simply dozed off. They were both at that sort of an age after all. But then a low rattling startled to build in Anthony's chest, and without opening his eyes, he parted his lips and a reedy slur issued forth. Anthony having started sampling the sherry quite some time before the guest's arrival. "Any word of Ormsby?" he asked Henry, although as spoken the words sounded more like Ormsby. Henry considered the question for a moment, as if pondering exactly how much he should tell his friend. "I was told he had remarried," he said finally. Anthony opened one baleful eye. "How could he?" he growled. Henry took another sip of sherry and sighed disapprovingly. "It just goes to show, proves the point. Provesh." Indeed, Henry's gaze drifted down to the parcel sitting in his friend's feet. "You were never tempted, I suppose?" The question served to rouse Anthony, who finally opened both his eyes and indignantly struggled upright in his chair. "There could never be anyone else," he said accusingly. "Never was and never will be." He stared across at Henry, as if daring him to say any different. But the other man merely gave a sorrowful shrug and sighed again. "I once thought it might get easier with the years. Time heals all wounds, as they say." Anthony rumbled his disapproval of this homily. "Not all wounds. Some merely fester." The doctor nodded wearily. "Well, one does what one can." He looked expectantly across Anthony. "Can I see her now? I was scarcely able to sleep last night for thinking of her." Anthony gave a long sigh, reminiscent of a dying elephant. Easing forward, he bent down and picked up his gift from the floor, which he proceeded to hand to Henry with an odd reluctance, as if to doggedly deny the old maxim about giving and receiving. As the other man took receipt of the parcel, Anthony's hands lingered on it for a moment, seemingly unwilling to part the item. Henry gave his friend a searching stare. "Is something the matter?" "Nothing at all," Anthony mumbled, immediately relinquishing his grip. "Just the thought of not seeing her for an entire year. At our age, one doesn't quite know how many years one has left, after all." Henry brought the package protectively to his chest, cradling it there. "Well, that's the agreement. We share her, heart and soul." Saying nothing, Anthony stared fixedly into the fire as Henry began to eagerly tear at the wrapping paper. In the heart light, the doctor's hungry eyes gleamed the polished obsidian. "Hello, my darling," he murmured. What now lay revealed in his lap was a large, sealed bell jar, filled with a cloudy liquid, but neither of those exterior trappings concerned Henry any more than the length of wrapping paper, now lying discarded on the rug. The true substance of the gift, the prize he had so fervently longed to see again ever since he last glimpsed it, some 365 days ago, was a woman's severed head. Did you least expect that that was the gift that they were exchanging among each other from so many years? To be continued tomorrow.